So this example is from the track called Supercluster. I'll play an example first. So it's a ambient electronic, and the reverb is actually quite a large component of this. So in this track, there are actually 7 different reverbs. I just opened a few examples here. Basically, a lot of the instruments have their own space. They're kind of all hanging in this gigantic atmosphere. So it's not like a rock track where you might have a short reverb and a long reverb. The idea here is auditioning reverbs on almost on each sound individually, so that you can put each one in its own space. They sort of have to work together in a way, but you can kind of customize it then so that it becomes an actual part of the sound itself. So let's look at the first example I was going to use is the snare, because here it's an extremely short relative to the rest of the reverbs. What's on the percussion in this track is relatively short, so it's about a 1 second or a half a second. And then without it. So you can hear it. What it's doing is adding this kind of slapback echo as well. And that was important in the overall mix. I couldn't really use a normal snare reverb, which was large, because then it's not contrasting with the other reverbs. They don't sound as big. So the idea was it's a little bit more of an echo than a reverb itself, so that it still adds something to the snare. It creates a space, but it doesn't use as much reverb as you would in a normal track for the snare, to keep a little bit of space for the other instruments. So I'll play that. So you can hear it's just very minor, but it gives the snare something, but without giving it this gigantic space that it would normally have. Then the next example is this lead from the Virus. So it's pretty standard, like almost 3 seconds, 2.5 seconds, and then without it. So actually, one of the main parts of that synthesizer is the delay, the echo that's on it. The reverb it's a pretty standard timing. This is just to give it a bit more body, a bit more depth, but it's not really as an effect in itself. It's just a standard reverb. The next example is a piano sound, which is it comes up later in the mix, so that I have to play this example for you guys. So it kind of just sits there in the middle of the mix in space. So it's got quite a big, it's like 4.5 seconds. So it's quite an important part of that sound, because there's not a lot else happening at that time in the track, and it gives it enough emphasis that it's able to hang there in the midair without any other instruments around it. Without it. Yeah, so without it, it just doesn't sound natural. It sounds like it's a a piano kind of at the wrong place in the mix. It really doesn't put it in the perspective. The next example is this little clavy kind of, I think it's a reactor sound. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the whole track, just this little tiny. And the reverb is here, it's massive, it's like 4 seconds. There is a reverb, I think, already left on it from the reactor patch, I think, when I bounced it out. But this it just adds so much space to it. I kept it quite high in the mix as well. So you get an idea from that each of these sounds, the piano, the synthly, the little clavy reactor thing, it basically is using completely different reverbs to create their own space and let them hang in the air. Because it's an ambient track, you can kind of go wild with the reverb timings here. We've got some quite large reverbs. There are actually even larger. I think there's like a 13-second reverb somewhere on this track as well. So that's just an example of using it as a creative tool.